Hello and welcome to the 2024 Stormies. Again, this is the 2024 contest for all photos taken in 2023. You're about to watch one of our critique videos for the official selections from one of our 5 categories: Tornado Photo of the Year, Photo of the Year, Photographer of the Year, Lightning Photo of the Year, and Photojournalistic Photo of the Year. As a reminder, we have a bunch of judges that help out. Not everyone can make it, so whoever shows up for one of these critiques, I'm just grateful that they volunteer their time, that they take this seriously, and that they're helping out. It's a tough job going over all these images and trying to provide constructive criticism and great feedback, as well as hopefully some teachable moments where we can all learn what to do better, what we could work on and improve on for this upcoming storm season, and but also, celebrating some of the amazing work that you all did last year. So without further ado, let's jump into one of our critique sessions. All right, so we're going to jump into our top 30 photos of the year. And we're just going to kick it off with these, and these are in no particular order. If you made the top 30, congratulations. Definitely tough. A lot of entries. And if you made it to the top 30, kudos to you. So we're going to start off with this image. And since I'm outnumbered by 2 awesome ladies today, I'm going to let one of you guys, kick off this image if you love it, if you hate it, or whatever your thoughts are.
I want to hear Linda's comments here.
Well, I think it's an amazing storm, first of all. Let's get that out of the way. I love all the different colors that lightning can make between layers of the clouds and what have you. Maybe it's a little bit detracting, this kind of road that's on the side. There's a little bit of a grass or a bush that's kind of lit up there, maybe by the lights of the car. And so overall, the composition to me falls a little bit short of what I would like to see, just because to me that kind of stuff is kind of blocking the storm. And I know that you're limited by your elevation and where you are and whatnot, but overall it's a great shot. It's also taken at night, so that sometimes can be very tricky to pick a spot to pull over to get a great shot. Overall, it's a cool shot.
Yeah, I would agree completely. You freak out when you get a shot like this because you get the stars up at the top and you got all these layers and you see all the mid-levels and all the structure. But really important to think about and consider your foreground. Are those foreground elements aiding in the overall, the impact that you want your image to have, or are they detracting? So those are things to consider, I think.
Yeah, I agree with both of you about this. I think at least the only thing for the foreground for me is that at least it's kind of very low in the frame, so it doesn't feel like it's taken up a lot of like useless space or unneeded, because the storm is huge. And sometimes it works really well when you have these foreground elements that kind of give that comparison and size of this giant storm out there, and power lines and trees and stuff like that. But
I think just a little step to the left could have improved it. Yeah. I mean, just getting the bulk of those trees to the right compositionally would have taken this up a notch, I think.
Yep. My eye was, well, unfortunately there's a little bit of blown out here, but my eye was drawn to this bubbling tower exploding here, that I can just picture that this is just erupting, and all I can think about is how great this would have been to time lapse the storm from almost anywhere. Would have been gorgeous. All right, we'll move on to this one. This one is I think I was there, just not anywhere near this really wonderful spot. This was in New Mexico, I think, but really cool. It's kind of rare, I think, to get some of the rain and underneath of a Supercell lit up with that kind of orange at sunset. Usually it's too cloudy, or the Supercell is too HP to really get that sun to shine through. And so it's kind of a nice moment. But if I were to look at this real quick, I feel like it's hard to tell if the horizon's just a little crooked or if it's that green pasture that gives an appearance that it's kind of slanted. But it's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, I like the colors a lot. I think that's the big thing that's working for the photographer in this image. I think compositionally, I may have, made some other some other decisions. I'm just curious about our ratio of foreground to sky, and it does feel a little tilted as well. But the bolt is managed, and man, the colors are just, I think, the winning thing here for me.
Yeah, I would add to that sometimes I've noticed there's a lot of, I don't know what the exact crop ratio is on this, maybe 3:2, but I would say don't be married to your crop ratio. You know, if there are elements that aren't aiding to you telling your story, you can crop a little bit. So, for example, in this image, I might choose actually to crop down from the top a bit.
Yeah.
The interesting part, the storm where the structure is the coolest isn't really along the top. So if you lose a little bit of that, it's not taking away from the story, and I think it might actually focus your eye more on where that storm is.
Yeah, doing like a 16:9, almost like a kind of panorama crop, can really make the storm actually look bigger, and the foreground like really give that nice comparison and stuff. That's a great tip. I think this one is actually a wide angle crop, like you were just saying. Like it's kind of allowed the storm to be more of the focus and feel a lot larger in the frame. I think for this one personally, I just really liked. I don't know. There was something really kind of hard to describe, but it's like the light on it and the lack of anything else feels really simplistic and kind of haunting or something in a way. I just kind of like that the storm is there with nothing else around. Almost could look like it was shot with a drone, and I don't know if it was, but I don't think so. But it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I feel like it's cool that you're. It almost feels like you're kind of on level with it, like you said. I don't know if it was shot with a drone or somebody that has a higher vantage point over a lower valley, but I think compositionally it's pretty cool. I think it's framed nicely that way. I would say that one critique that I might have is that I feel if I look into the blues or maybe even some of the oranges and yellows, that's really saturated. I feel like you're really pushing up against the outsides of your color space. And for me, that detracts a little bit. So I might, pull that back a little bit. I don't know if this person did some kind of split toning or something. It almost looks like there's some color in the blacks, which is fine. If it works, it works. I feel color wise, this image could be pulled back a little bit.
Yeah, I love the crop. It gives it that cinematic feel that I'm always interested in. I keep going to this little pinpoint of light on that right side. I would have nixed. Yeah, I would have nixed that little guy out of there. And I see that definitely they're trying to do some tonal management here. And those highlights, I think, are still just they've got to be clipped and pulled back. But it's really tough. You've got those darks to the lights, and it's hard to manage in the scene. But all good feedback so far.
Yeah, and it's a good point about this, because there's like obviously some turbines out there that are red, which, obviously you can keep, but this is a light that could also look like a hot pixel. And if it's like any debate between what that might be, then I would just get rid of it, because it's like it is something that I kept looking at too. Okay, here's another one that I just love the storm itself. I guess probably for me, I love this storm so much that I kind of wish there was nothing in the foreground at all, just the storm. And and I think maybe a little bit of a crop upward, maybe up to the left just a little bit, would isolate the storm just a little bit more. But an incredible supercell, because this inflow tail is just ridiculous to have that attached and wrap in like that, and the blues that are up here. Beautiful, beautiful storm.
Yeah, you can't beat, that kind of structure. I mean, I just want to grab that handle and flip it upside down and make some pancakes. No, really gorgeous, gorgeous. I think there's some nice, again, we've got such tough tonal management to work on. But I think the photographer did a nice job in their retouching. My eye travels all along the image. I think that's pleasant. Overall, just a nice shot of a beautiful supercell, I think.
I think if I could give one little critique is that on the bottom left corner, the road is barely out of it, or the side of the road is barely out of it. You can tell from the way that the grass kind of bends in and whatever. And so I always love it the most if you can be square on to the storm, so the grass kind of points towards the left and the storm is kind of directly in front of you. So when I'm stuck in this kind of a situation and taking this amazing shot, I try to kind of make sure that you almost can't tell that the road is just right there. So I might crop out that bottom corner a little bit, or if it would have been possible for you to take another step or two forward, I don't know. I mean, it might not have been. Then I would try to get rid of that kind of look.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, for sure. It's
but that's really being nitpicky. I mean, obviously it's
no, it's great. I really think just a slight little crop up would kind of fix some of that too, and put the focus on the storm a little bit more. All right, we'll move on to this one, which I generally have. I think we talked about it on another one. Jen was on this, and we've talked about it in the past where Linda's been around too, where we've like, if you're going to use the road, center the road. But for some reason, this works for me because I feel like there's a really cool symmetry between where the right edge of the shelf cloud is lit up and the field underneath it. And I don't know, but the way the road is even off center here actually kind of works for me. But I think it's probably more of just the sky is incredible and it's just a gorgeous, I would be losing my mind. I think I was somewhere there, but not underneath it like this. This is ridiculous.
We've got some hyper saturation happening here.
Yeah, true.
So, these are stylistic choices. Absolutely. And, we edit our photos how we feel. It expresses our interpretation of what we saw. But when we're talking about a competition, these things are going to be coming into play. I love the feeling. I think the light is incredible and what a scene to see indeed. Again, I'm having some trouble with focus. I'm missing where the focus is in this image. Can you tell me, you got the settings there, Mike?
Yeah, it's a f4.5, 14 millimeter.
Okay. Yeah. So just most of the image is out of focus or blurry. So
it's
that,
a little soft. Yeah.
That causes some problems for me, but,
well, and there's a good, there's some good tools out there for like Topaz, like sharpening AI and stuff to help, fix some of those things. And sometimes you struggle with that, right? Yeah. And it's one of those things that you don't think about. And it's also these underneath a shelf like this is probably incredibly windy, and you just don't even realize that. So if this was the storm that I was on, I wasn't here, but sometimes I definitely probably agree with you that it might be a little oversaturated. And definitely, like if you kind of look back at the thumbnail, it feels that way. But I also know that if this was the same storm, that there was, we were in certain parts that I'm going to have to, when I edit, I'm going to have to actually desaturate a little bit because people won't believe it. So I don't know. I struggle with sometimes like out there, you've all seen it where the colors are just so crazy that you're like, no one's actually going to believe that this is what it looked like. And
yeah, we did some really great shots like that last year too, where I bemoaned the level of saturation. But I would say that one tip that I have, because you can look at this objectively when it's your own photograph too, and see maybe whatever's happening in the field on the bottom right is like a bit too hot, too over the thing. So what I would say is don't be afraid to like selectively edit the image.
Yeah.
Maybe you can put a gradient down there, bring the saturation back. I know it was crazy. I know that looked nuts. And just also trying to balance that orange with the kind of bluish, aqua-y, greenish stuff that you have going on in the cloud is extremely difficult. And I think sometimes this is where local adjustments can really help you, convey the moment the way that your eyes saw it.
Okay, we'll go on to this one. I know that I think saw this one in the lightning photo of the year. Since I think me and Jen talked about it already. So Linda, you have any thoughts about this one?
Well, wow, first of all, that's a doozy right there. I've had a few shots like that myself, and you're definitely alert after something like that drops out of the sky. I feel like it's even more dramatic because it's in the day, and I feel like it can be very tricky to get bolts that are show up so significantly in a photo during the day.
With all the filaments. Too.
Yeah, with all the filaments and all that. So, no ND filters and anything on this, and still being able to capture all this detail is super amazing. I would say my only gripe would kind of be that, again, the blues up in the top left, it almost looks like things are kind of tearing apart in those cloud layers up there. And then in the foreground, I think, again, a gradient might be nice to maybe decrease the contrast in the foreground and maybe bring the blacks back into an area where they're still on the histogram. I don't always necessarily mind if things are what we call crushed. If it's either overly white or overly black, that's fine. That has its spot. But I think in this case, the foreground looks kind of what I would call crunchy. Just a little too gritty, too black, and too texturized. So you could do what you want to do in the foreground separately from the sky by using gradients and local adjustments. But the shot itself is very cool. And I can't really zoom in right now on my computer, but I can see kind of like this orangey glow coming from one of the landing spots. Yeah, that's
you actually see the landing point, and there looks like there's an upward streamer on the left. It's just
super cool.
It's unfortunate that it's a little soft or pretty soft in the focus.
Right.
One thing I'll note is that the settings a little interesting because it's at f20 for 1 second and ISO 80, so they were obviously trying to get the slowest shutter speed possible so they wouldn't miss any lightning, which I totally respect and have been there. At the same time, on some cameras, going up to f20 can actually cause softness to show back up. There's like a sweet spot usually with your lens between like f8 and f16 in general.
Yeah.
So I've done the same thing where I've been to the Grand Canyon. I had a 135 millimeter and I brought it up to like f32. I had no idea it could even do that. And then I get these lightning strikes in the distance, and then I get home and I realize they're kind of soft, and it's because you get too far on one side.
It's a trade-off, right?
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
For sure. Yeah. And also, I just want to, just as an aside, there's always some crappy little bush somewhere in the foreground. And I find that bush and focus your camera there, because this bolt is almost behind that little bush there, that left strike point, and that's where the lightning bolt's going to go. Just for anyone that wants to know how to photograph lightning, this is how you do it. Focus on the bush, and then we'll go there.
That's awesome. I love that.
All right, we'll go to this one. Jen, what do you think of this one?
Oh, wow. I think this is beautiful and serene. This gives me lots of fine art vibes. I'm a sucker for any kind of a dune sort of, desert shot. I love the textures. I love the tones. I think overall it's just really beautiful. It's less about the storm and more about the scenery.
Yep.
And the balance and the artfulness of this composition is probably the thing I like the most. How about you, Linda?
I would agree with a lot of what you were saying. I find it, very serene. It's almost like the lightning bolt that's back there isn't really the main character. It's more, like you said, the scene overall. But this is a storm contest, so we do have to talk about what we're seeing back there. And I think that if you wanted to enhance this photo for the purposes of this contest, I might actually crop up from the bottom and once again not get married to maybe the crop that came out of your camera, just to balance the foreground a little bit against what you have going on with the storm in the background. And I understand, it may be more than people just being attached to the 3x2 crop. Sometimes people will overthink, and they'll also think, okay, I need to work on a rule of thirds. If I crop it in from the bottom, then the horizon will be closer to the middle. But sometimes, those rules aren't like firmly in place. Sometimes things work even though a horizon is in the middle or something is off to the side. Don't let that detract you from potentially making some crops to enhance what you're trying to show in this particular contest. And I understand, like, getting such an amazingly beautiful shot of the dune, you don't want to crop that out because you're married to your photo. But I'm not married to your photo, and I would crop
I would have a tough time cropping it because I love how that edge of that dune just
really is
goes
beautiful.
across, and like the ripples on the sand. Like,
yeah,
I'm just impressed that, I mean, I don't know. I know this was at White Sands, and I traiped around the dunes in Death Valley once and tried to find anything where someone hadn't been stepping already. And so just like in my brain, when I see something like this, I'm like, that is pristine looking sand that no one has walked on. And either they photoshopped a footprint out or it looked like that. And I guess if it makes it far enough and we get the raw file, we can find out. But I'm just blown away by finding this pristine, gorgeous, dune and being able to get a storm back there. I agree. It's, with the storm kind of high up in the frame, it makes it feel like it's less the focus, but I think, it's not like monster, like some of the photos we'll see later, are going to be insane storms that are going to be like, wow. So the composition is a little bit less important as the storm is amazing. And this is almost a little bit the opposite, but I like the tones and the color palette is so beautiful. And just the rareness of like white dunes to be able to get in a shot, just
yeah.
amazing.
I'd like to add one more thing. As someone who shoots in the desert, like about 90% of the time, I would say that this person is standing in some kind of blowing sand situation. So rest in peace to that lens getting blasted. And I appreciate you taking the shot because, no doubt there's a lot of sand blowing around. So
I mean, the edge of this is kind of glowy. Yeah. So it makes me think you're right, that it's blowing a little bit. And so cool. All right, so we have like 2 photos in a row of the same storm, and it's actually going to be interesting to see the juxtaposition between them. This is kind of tough for me. I feel like most of this was a tough scene, just because not unfortunately, but fortunately, I was also there, and I was trying to figure out how do I capture this crazy LP Supercell that barely had any rain falling with intense sunlight behind it, especially at this moment. And, I think this person did about as best they could. The only real issue I have with it is I feel like I would have probably centered the Supercell a little more, which we probably see in the next photo. But I'm kind of curious what you guys think.
Well, it's not like they could just put up some big reflectors to fill in, like my portrait brain would do that, but we can't do that in the field. So I commend the maker of this image for their post-processing decisions in terms of tone and bringing out those details and the nice twisting updraft. It's so spectacular. I love being able to see all those textures and those laminar bands. I mean, that's just delicious. And the little lightning bolt in there is really cool. I have some challenges with some hypersaturation happening on the bottom half of the frame, but again, like dealing with that glaring sunlight, it casts that strong yellow orange glow. So I think Linda's tips about, local adjustments could maybe come into play here. But wow, there's a lot of impact here, which is something that we're also judging. The impact of the image is very important. And I think you got that in this as well.
Yeah, I would basically everything that Jennifer said. One thing that I'll add composition wise is that Mike, you were saying when it's maybe a bit more centered would be nice, but because this lightning bolt is there, this really works. Because if you had centered, that guy would be out of the frame, and it's kind of neat because you can kind of see this little inflow tail going in there. And so I feel balance wise, if you wanted to do any cropping, you basically have no room to, because you start removing elements, and then just editing wise, you're shooting straight into the sun. That's super hard. One of the hardest things about shooting into the sun, because the sun is so bright, is this kind of highlight roll off. So I will give you one of my tips, what you can do to try to help with this a little bit, because you have a little bit up in the clouds near the top left, and then you have obviously around the sun. This one actually does pretty well around the sun, but if you wanted it to be a little bit less, that it's just a white dot, you can go in there, make a very small little radial gradient with a little bit of blur on the gradient, and just take the color picker, pick a color very close to where it goes white, and just fill in with that color on top of the sun, and it will kind of even things out. And you can do the same with the clouds. Just selectively find where the edge is, because you can kind of see that there's darker blues right underneath that really hyper white. You can kind of put a gradient there and just minimize the contrast in that region, and it will kind of just smooth out this transition or these harder lines that you can find in some of the photos. So I would say reduce the contrast locally, and or put a little gradient, radial gradient thing over the sun, and just put a little color in there.
Great tip. I think that's tough. Is even besides a gradient, you could do a little bit of like cloning, where you can kind of just blend it around so it feels like that blend is better than just being a very harsh drop off, like you said.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go on to this next one. The same storm, so obviously a little later, different colors, and it has more of that issue with the sun, I would say, in this instance, where you're trying to probably bring the highlights down, and it's kind of that sharp little drop off there.
Yep.
And I was there, and the different positions on the storm, even if you're just up the road, really seemed like it affected some of the color on it. But this one, I feel like could be maybe lacking a little bit of that orange color, because it was pretty intense. But the sun here is almost down, where here it's a little higher, so it might have actually dropped off a little bit.
Yeah, I love this shot. One of the things that I love the most about this shot is this kind of spirals. They're getting sucked into this vortex, and
yeah,
I think that's really nicely framed here. You can see that the top left of the image is completely blown out. I would guess. I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but again, to minimize that boundary, you can do some local adjustments, and the same with the sun. As far as the colors overall, I really like it. It's not so overly saturated in my opinion, so this works better for me. You could use a little bit of a gradient maybe in the foreground and just bring those blacks up a little bit, but overall I find this a very pleasing image. Well done.
Agreed.
All right, we'll go on to this next one. I'll let you guys start off on this one, because I don't want to talk all the time, but I really like this one.
I like it too, actually. One of the things is, like, you don't necessarily know the brightness of a lightning bolt that's going to shoot out of this thing in the night. And so unless you've been there for a while and you can kind of gauge the brightness of a certain storm, Mike will attest to this because he shoots a lot of night lightning. It's very difficult to get the bolt and the filaments and everything, and nothing is really egregiously blown out. So in this case, I think the settings work really well to capture the scene. And it's a bit of a guesswork if you're just rolling up there and shooting that. So in terms of that, I find this technically well done. I would say the composition is not bad. We all choose different things, but I think it doesn't, even though the road is in there and it's a little bit sideways and you have a couple of little colored dots on the right side of the frame near the horizon that you could remove. I don't feel that overall it really detracts. And the storm is just right above this area with the silos. I'm not sure if that's a farm or what's happening there, but if anything, I might crop down from the top a little bit. Even though there's a tiny little bit of the lightning strike up there, I could see why someone wouldn't crop it. But overall, I find this pretty well done. What do you think, Jennifer?
Yeah, I echo everything you're saying for sure. In terms of the cropping, the composition, those dots on the right side, they get me every time. I would take those out. Those crash points are pretty intense. But I think that the light from that little train and the silos balances with the lightning bolts. If I got this image, I would be jumping up and down. So nice work.
the road doesn't detract me, and I think it kind of almost leads your eye to this nice little bit of humanity there. And this, I don't know, there's a really cool scale. I don't know if it's because of the road or just because of what's in the distance, but a lot of it gives the storm some really cool scale, and with the silos and the train, and like you said, pretty impressive, because the settings say it was f4 and ISO 30 or ISO 320. So at f4, you're pretty wide, and if your ISO is over 300, the fact that it really didn't blow out is pretty remarkable. And usually when it goes through clouds like that, the entry points are always going to be pretty blown out. It's almost hard to ever get that right. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to this one, which this one probably right off. I'm sure after hearing you guys already that the might be some hyper saturation going on. And so I think it's probably a little too blue, a little too magenta-y. But the storm itself and the composition with the stars and the lightning and kind of, for me, I like to see images like this because I tend to be such a stickler for wanting to be on the other side of these kind of storms. I want to see the structure. I want to, but the people that can take a break and, hey, I'm going to watch this from far away, kind of on the backside. I'm always impressed with that. I definitely think that there's some car trails here that I would have gotten rid of because I feel like those are just kind of unnatural. I would have probably got rid of that one and maybe this one and maybe that one. But overall, like it's a beautiful scene, and like this storm erupting in these, looking at this like kind of laminar on the backside, this swirling structure makes me just think, what's the other side look like? And that's probably what I would be doing. But it's a beautiful shot. Just I think the colors are off a little bit.
Yeah, this is when I don't mind the saturation as much. And,
of course, I got it wrong.
No, you don't. That it's not wrong. Everyone,
I know.
Art is subjective. So
yes,
if I find the colors to be a distraction, that's when I have a problem. For me, I feel like this works very well for a night scene. I like the coldness of the blues and that blue sky with the stars, and I feel like the pinks and the blues work so nicely together. It's one of my favorite color combinations, so I'm probably biased. And we're doing long exposures, and when we have fast moving storms, we're going to get that natural movement. And so there's some sharpness issues and stuff, but as storm chasers, we know that we're working with high winds and moving subjects here. So all said and done, I enjoy this photo.
Yeah, well, then I'm gonna ruin it. I do find the saturation a little off-putting.
Totally fine.
But I agree. Like sometimes it has sort of this kind of graphic style to it.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. It doesn't necessarily have to reflect a reality in 100% of the way. Of course, if you like, you can make it any way you want. And this is, I think, where our personal takes on things can vary from time to time, depending on what colors we personally favor and what. But if I try to look at it really objective, I would say, you're really cranking that color space. You're giving it a run for it. And I would actually crop down from the top a bit. The focus is a storm, and although it is super cool that you got the stars in there as well, you don't have to crop them out all the way. But if you turn this into something where you maybe take out a quarter of the frame just out of the top, I think it would lend more focus to the storm. And everything else, Mike, that you said about the car trails and stuff like that, I agree with. But overall, the storm and being on this side of it, I think this image is super cool. Well done.
All right, we'll go on to this one. I feel like I could be wrong. And Linda, you weren't on the tornado critique that we did.
That was a couple of years ago. Wasn't there a tornado with a flower in the foreground?
Oh, there was. I'm thinking on our tornado critique from this year, we had someone who actually took the time to drop behind some plants to shoot a tornado on the other side of these barbed wire fences, where the barbed wire fence kind of crossed in front of the tornado. And we were really debating between the artistic nature of this person who actually took a chance to step back and do something that I would never do, instead of finding like a wide open spot for the tornado. And so I don't know. I think this might be the same. It has the same kind of vibes, but I just like that it's something different and unique than what we tend to see with a lot of the submissions. And it's really bright there on the upper left. I don't know that if it's like completely blown out. It might be a little bit. But the light on the flowers and just the fact that, there's some power lines and it looks like some buildings back there and the flowers kind of mask it off a little bit. It just gives it a different vibe. I think if anything, I probably would have like taken out this little tall thing of wheat here, whatever that little blade of grass is, I probably would have gotten rid of that just because it feels a little distracting from all the flowers and stuff. But I just like the color palette. It's a little bit different. It's got like a film vibe to it, like someone took it with, you know, a Polaroid or some kind of old Canon A1 or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely has this kind of cross-processed vibe to it that you describe, like a Kodak film almost. I would say that if my feet had to be in that exact same spot and take a photo, this is probably the better way to go, because I can imagine that once you stand up and you look over those flowers, there's some stuff back there that's not going to look particularly great. So if you only got one shot off, this is probably pretty neat to try to get down low and capture something that a lot of people, I think, wouldn't really consider. So just on your path of, you know, trying to grow as a photographer, taking shots like this, I think, can be tremendously beneficial to learn how to take interesting shots that maybe other people aren't taking. Like you said, it's a bit hot there in the left center. Well, I also would say that maybe this hotness is increased because there's a rather strong vignette that runs along the image, which for me is kind of a detraction. And so I'm almost not really sure where the focal point is or anything, but I really appreciate them, this particular photographer, getting down low and trying to get shots that we don't usually see. I was quite a fan of a couple of years ago. We had a shot with a tornado with some flowers in the foreground, and the tornado was almost just a backdrop. It was more about what was in the foreground, and I just thought it was unique to get perspectives like that, because I think a lot of us aren't really looking at that when we're out there.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I wish this photographer had, I'd be curious to see the raw file, I guess. I've got some real challenges with some of the processing. It seems like everything's just been super, super sharpened. I see so many artifacts and the flowers. I'm not quite sure what the focus is. Is the focus the flowers? It seems like they're really sharpening those flowers. I love the texture in the storm, but you know, I have some real questions about our processing. I think, you know, if we have to take the sharpening that far, then we should probably be paying a little more attention to our focus when we're taking the image. But compositionally and tonally, I really enjoy those elements of this photo for sure.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a problem with, there's great tools out there. I think I'd already mentioned like Topaz AI sharpening. There's great tools out there, but at the same time, sometimes you use them and they actually can make it look worse because of introducing those artifacts, and you have to really zoom in to see, like, is this actually helping me, or is it causing a problem? Especially if you think about printing something like this in a large print or something, it's that kind of stuff is going to be more noticeable. All right, we'll go on to this one, which I just love the composition, and I love the kind of restrained kind of editing. And I probably know this photographer because of recent years of submissions, and it looks familiar, like they basically have a certain style. And I just like someone who takes the time to do this. I have a hard time sometimes finding these great little houses and abandoned places out there when I'm chasing. I feel like there's always something else in the way that I don't like, and so I just keep driving. But I really like this. Feels very haunting to me.
I totally agree. I love the tones. It feels like the scene and the scenery in The Ring, if you saw that movie. Like it's like stormy and the light is low, but all the tones and the details are there. It's super sharp. I can't say enough about how I enjoy the way this image makes me feel. It's lovely.
That's a good way to describe it. I like the way it makes me feel too. I think it, you know, but it's obviously there's a lot going on in the sky, and it's you know, a pretty beefy storm that's going on back there, but it still gets this kind of serene feeling. And I think you know, this kind of late daylight, I'm assuming it's late in the day, kind of is lighting up the front of this little house. And the fact that the walls of the house are a bit white is interesting, because I think it does an interesting thing with the composition where you kind of play between that house and the front face of it, and the symmetry of just the windows and the door in the house, and what is going on in the background. So overall, I would say I really like this image. Nicely done.
This is another one. I think the same photographer, and it's just the same kind of softer like tones, that less, I don't know, it's kind of, this one feels a little more saturated maybe than the last one. Maybe it's because the blues really pop. But I just love the moodiness of it. I love the storm itself. The structure is just beastly, and there's dust everywhere, and that hint of the sun coming through is just magnificent. And the foreground is just very even. There's nothing. I mean, maybe on the bottom left, it gets a little bit like sparser, this corn, if you're going to nitpick on anything, I guess. And but it's nice to have a foreground that's very like kind of balanced all the way across. A lot of times when we're out there chasing, the foregrounds are mixed with different kinds of like vegetation or like a road or something that's kind of messing with it. So
yeah, this is a very tough situation to photograph, I feel, because you can see from the blue that's kind of peeking out from behind the storm that we're still in daylight, or at least right before the sun is completely gone, and the sun is trying to poke through the storm there in the bottom. I imagine that the raw file from this image was fairly underexposed, and so you can really see that the blacks were brought up so much that it almost has this kind of gray haziness to it. I don't know to what degree the haziness is from bringing up the darkness of the photo, and which part is the obvious blowing dust that's happening in the situation. But when I look in the top of this storm, I can see that colors are starting to be ripped apart.
yeah,
It's kind of how you know you went too far with what you're doing edit wise. I don't have like a super good suggestion of how to shoot this or edit it, because you're kind of having to pick trade-offs, right? You can shoot it fairly underexposed and make sure that nothing is overexposed, so that you have that information, because you can still see the clouds on the left side still have information there.
Yep.
But I would probably just blow that part out for saving, the 90% of the image where you do have but it's just one of those tricky situations. You got blowing sand, you're pulling up, maybe there's other people around, you got other traffic, there's lots of stressors that are going on. And so it's very difficult sometimes to make, good decisions. And in that case, I would fire off a couple shots, or set up your camera so that you can shoot like a bracketed, and just try to get as much as you can. And then later on, you can worry about how you want to edit it.
Yep.
Okay.
That's a good point. I think people forget that bracketing is a thing.
Yep.
I feel like that's an old school thing that people don't remember exists. So those are good tips.
Yeah, I think bracketing is I feel like, at least for me, it's a little less necessary with the camera's dynamic range that they have now, that usually you're able to get enough where you don't have to do that, but it can introduce more noise even on great cameras, when you bring up shadows. So it's still a thing. It's just hard with storms because they're moving so fast that even the biggest thing with bracketing the HDR back in the day was movement between shots, even if they're like a split second apart. It's especially out here, is super tough. This one, I know it has some like kind of maybe some softness issues with the focus, but I just appreciate this composition, this storm, and the lightning bolt. It's definitely like a rare landscape to find out there when you're chasing, and it's a gorgeous composition to me. And I don't know if the colors might be pretty saturated, but it all works for me.
I agree with all of that. I feel like it's very pleasing. It has incredible impact. I keep coming back to that word because it's so important with what we're judging here. I love that orangey sun in the bottom left. There's a lot of color, but there are a lot of colors. I mean, we've got these beautiful greens, and then the storm has its own set of colors. So it may be a little saturated. We've got some softness, but these things are trade-offs again. And I agree. Wow.
I will say one thing. I don't know if Linda wanted to say something, but this was shot at f2.8, and that is definitely probably causing a lot of the sharpness. So it's with the Canon 5DSR, which I use, an ISO 400. So I think what I probably would have done is to at least get up to like 5.6 and probably try to slow the shutter speed down a little bit, just so that it's not because at 1/100th, I definitely think you probably have some room to get a slower shutter speed. So if you're at f2.8, you're probably going to have a softer focused image, and this kind of scene probably deserves more of like a 5.6 to f8, and then just figuring out that balance between the clouds moving and the shutter speed and all that kind of stuff. But that's probably what caused it.
Yeah. So I guess a couple things for me. I'm not sure if this is just shot incredibly wide, like something like 11 millimeters or something.
That's 24. It's 24.
Okay, so I wonder if this is a panorama. This is kind of giving me this feeling like maybe it could be. But regardless of what it is, there's also something near the front of the frame. I don't know if that's like a little fence post that's a bit out of focus there, or.
Oh, I see that right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I might work on that because my eye likes to go there. And there's also kind of this on my monitor anyway. There's a bright spot kind of on the bottom along the close to the left side, and I might get rid of that. Of course, that's nitpicking, but for me, the colors are. I don't really like this kind of aqua-y, greeny. Like, I understand that storms have their own color, but I feel like there's something more going on here because the clouds kind of have this kind of dirty look to them. Like there's a color in there that I don't expect there to be there. And the heavy vignette, I think also for me, detracts a little bit. But the impact, what Jennifer was saying, is super high for me. You know, it's unusual to see a landscape like that with this over it. And being able to be there when that's happening, you know, that's always the trick, because I feel like a lot of these landscapes are down long, dusty roads. And once you're there, if a storm pops up, I don't even know, 10 miles away, you're never going to get there in time. So I appreciate the dedication of going here and having the foresight to stay there and capture this storm.
Yeah. I mean, and you brought up a good point. I didn't, I kind of forget about doing the panoramas, and this could have been a handheld shot, and they were shooting at f2.8 and ISO 400 just to get 1/100th of a shutter speed so that it wouldn't actually, so it'd be as sharp as possible at that. So that's tricky. So that's why probably like a tripod or something is good. But doing a panorama with the tripod, tough unless you have that, swivel head that some people have. So.
One thing that I'd like to add to it when it comes to f-stops, because there's a lot of okay, well, this is sharp and this is not sharp. Actually, shooting at f2.8 when you're shooting with a wide angle lens is not necessarily bad. If you're shooting kind of, technically it's called the hyperfocal distance, but if you're shooting about like a third of the way into the scene, which is kind of where the flat grass starts in this scene, if you're kind of focusing there, most of your image will be in focus even at f2.8. And I think with wide angle lenses, you can actually get away with shooting a little bit more open. If you wanted to be at f4 or f2.8, you can get away with that.
Yep. Good point. I just like the mood of this one. I think it might be a little bit grainy, but it also looks like it's a lot of rain falling all over. So that might actually be what we're looking at and maybe it's a little over sharpened to make that pop a little more. But there's still, I just love the mistiness. It's a totally different vibe than a lot of what we've seen, because I'm sure that this was shot in a country probably other than the United States, which is nice. And I just like there might be some editing stuff. It's really hard to tell when you're in these scenes, right? Because it looks like there's like some shadows raised here where there's some like haloing. But at the same time, it could also just be rain lighting up, getting lit up from the lightning, and so so there might be some over sharpening stuff going on, but I just kind of like the mood of this one.
Oh, I love the textures. I wish we had a larger file for this.
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder if it was cropped or what's going on, and that makes it hard to analyze the quality and the issues of over sharpening and things like that. But aside from that, I love the rain. I love the textures in the rain, textures in the fog. that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Textures in the the greenery. I like the tones a lot. It has a very specific feeling. This also has excellent impact.
Yep.
No pun intended.
No pun definitely intended. You take that back.
Jen had to bring another dad joke today, which is great.
At least one.
At least one.
I would say that I find that the impact super high of this, and that's for me kind of the thing I look at first before I start nitpicking. Because if I'm not wowed by this from far away, then I don't feel that it's necessarily worth being like, oh well, you did this tiny thing, whatever. So the impact is there for me. I feel that there's something weird going on with the saturation. I see there's a lot of magentas and there's a lot of greens. I don't know if this image was very underexposed and somebody brought it up, but I think this edit could benefit from doing some local adjustments, because the areas where the fog is there, you can see this kind of purpley color in there, and it's likely from bringing it up, the sensor sometimes can introduce this kind of color noise. And the green that's in the lower left corner is in stark contrast with that. So I would either bring down that green to match that a little closer to what's happening in the midground, or I would kind of keep it. Yeah, I would just kind of even that out. You decide how you want to do it, but I think it could benefit some local adjustments. But I do love the rain in this case. There was probably some raindrop or something that the person even had to remove from their lens.
I actually think I see one right here.
Okay.
This is the edge of like probably a raindrop right there.
Yeah. So
I just noticed it. So I agree. I bet you from thinking about something like shooting this, that it was probably really dark in the foreground all around the trees. And so it did introduce some of that color stuff. At the same time, I feel like it's actually kind of well done if it was really dark, to bring that up without it looking super bad. Because if a normal, like just someone getting in Lightroom or Photoshop bringing up shadows where it's really dark, it can look really bad. And this at least was pretty tastefully done with what they had to work with. So I like that what you both said about the impact, because that's what
I think I would like to add to that. One tip that I have, if you suffer from some color unevenness like this and you want to try to bring it a little closer to neutral, for example, I'm not saying that's what you should do. You do what you like, but if that's what you were trying to do, what you can do is you can kind of select this area where it's too magenta or too green, whatever you like, and introduce the opposite color into it, right? So if you have too much magenta, add in the opposite color. You can literally pick that, select the inverse color, and then add that, and then we'll bring it closer to neutral. So if people are wondering how they can kind of adjust sensor problems like that, that's one way to do it.
All right, we're gonna go to this one. I'm gonna let y'all start with this one.
Well, I would say that's very colorful in a way that I feel if I were there, and I wasn't there, I would think that the location of that house, which is obviously something that the photographer feels that they want to share with us in this way, it's like too bright. I don't know if there's like a circular gradient or something over there that's bringing up the levels on that house in a way that is kind of unnatural. But we had an image earlier too that had kind of some unnatural colors in it, but it had this kind of like stylistic effect. And I feel this is the same with this image. Like, I don't hate it because of that. But if I wanted to keep it a little bit more close to natural, I might bring back the saturation levels on the foreground and that house. I might actually let it fall into shadow a little bit the way that it was. But the composition overall is pleasing. You're far enough away from the stuff that is obscuring, that would potentially obscure the storm, that it just plays nicely with it. So overall, I find the image nice. I might take back the color a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. We already have such a bright spot over the house because of the sun. Making that house also a bright spot really drags the eye. So I completely agree with that. But aside from that, in the positives, I really love this storm. I think the composition is very nice. And I do like the color palette. It might just be a little strong on the saturation for me in this shot.
All right, move on to this next one. I'm not sure. I believe when I looked at the information, this was up in Oregon or Washington, probably like that gorge area. I feel like this photographer submitted last year, and it was a beautiful shot with like a rainbow and some Amatis, but also the river. And this one is probably, Linda, from what you said earlier about that one shot, was like not necessarily, oh, the White Sands one. Maybe it's not as much a storm shot as a landscape shot. This one has a nice squiggly bolt of lightning that I guess makes it a storm shot. But it's just such a beautiful scene, and there is lightning in it, and the composition and color and editing to me is really, really outstanding. So I definitely think it deserves to be here, but in terms of like, you know, the overall like impact of big storm shots, it's definitely on the weaker side. But the colors and stuff are magnificent.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would like a postcard of this, please. It's really pretty. Really, really pretty. The depth, the contrast is beautiful. It's got a mood I really appreciate. The reflections on the rocks, the reflections on the roof of that house down there. The way that the orange tones play through the image, I just really like. I really like that.
Well,
Linda.
It's a beautiful image. I don't know if the horizon's completely straight or not. It can always be a little bit difficult with when you have like little mountains that roll into a river in there. But my critique, you know, because we've already highlighted all the beautiful things about this image, and I agree with all of those. But if I would give some critique on this, since the lightning bolt is kind of a more, I don't want to say it's insignificant, but the lightning bolt's presence in the image isn't super great. So, you know, you're trying to make that the focus in this image, and so the rest of the image is kind of more dark. But because this image is, so much of it is not that lightning bolt, then I feel that we would benefit from being able to see a little bit more into the darkest reaches of this image, because there's so much of it. And so, you know, where the road is, you know, the green foliage around there, I might roll back the saturation on that a little bit and see if I can't bring that out of the shadows just slightly, you know, just to help balance it against the rest of the image, because otherwise the lightning bolt, the presence of that isn't enough that it warrants the whole picture falling into shade for me.
Yep, that's good. Okay, this image, it's definitely kind of out of focus, a little soft for sure. Sometimes I see an image and I think we were talking about impact or something, and it's not, it's definitely got like some editing stuff and it's soft, but this person, it's obviously super close to whatever is going on here. And this is just very impactful of a storm, and maybe it could have been in like photojournalistic category, but I just like the impact of it and what's happening with, you know, it's got a lot of flaws with maybe I shouldn't say a lot of flaws. I don't want to be mean about that, but the horizon could be a little bit straighter and it's definitely soft, but it's probably handheld from the position where it's taken, but just a mean looking storm. And if you look at the thumbnail of it, I think sometimes it's like Linda said, I like to see if there's an impact before I start getting into the nitpicky stuff. And looking at the thumbnail of it is just, it's magnificent. And then when you kind of see the other stuff, you got to talk about that. But a beautiful, nasty looking storm.
Oh yeah, that thumbnail impact is intense. And obviously we have, you know, this is one where you see the character of the storm, you know. Every storm has its own personality, and this one's nasty. So that comes across very clearly. This image, in terms of retouching, is what I would call crispy. So there's definitely it's a little crispy, crunchy, like Linda was saying. But I also am wondering, you know, of course, this is a foreboding moment. It's bearing down. This photographer might not have had a lot of time, but I'm wondering why they are shooting from this position. I would just run across and get on the other side of those power poles and shoot up, you know? So I feel like some of these foreground elements are really distracting if we're not talking about retouching as much. But, you know, I also understand being in that moment. So it is always a balance and a trade-off.
Yeah, I get almost a feeling that they're just shooting out the passenger side window.
Yeah.
Or driver's side, yeah.
It's time to go. This is not time to run through fields, my friend. but yeah, everything else I echo. And of course, the editing for me, it's a bit, crunchy. Let's stay with that. And
crispy.
Not crispy and crunchy. I don't even know. This could even be a cell phone shot. I don't know.
It says Canon 90D.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, just a lot of colors are being ripped apart. I really have no good, feedback on how to really fix that. If you have a bit of a camera that isn't as good dynamic range wise, but the impact is there. I echo the power line situation and all, but it's a heck of a. Ooh, I would not stick around too long.
Yeah.
I'd be in heaven right there, but I think I would be terrified. I'm having a hard time deciding which way it was moving.
You can get off about a 10-second time lapse before you back to the car.
I've done that plenty of times where I've set up and gone after 10 seconds going, nope, let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I think the next two, these might be the same one as the same photographer with the mountains. I feel like they really find some awesome locations for their lightning shots, and the lightning bolts are not necessarily, well, the other one we saw with the mountains and the rain it hit the ground, so that's really cool. But even like these crawlers lighting up the foreground, just in the rocks on the left, I wish that I had more landscapey stuff like this to shoot, or high areas with roads maybe that are easier to get to shoot things like this. But beautiful crawler and lighting all that up. I just love that.
Yeah, this image has a ton of impact for me. And I often find myself shooting on open terrain near mountains, which is terrifying and extremely dangerous, first of all. And so, I can't necessarily commend people for making poor choices about where they're put their feet, but this image is really quite incredible. And I feel like we had an image a couple of years ago where there was like a strike hitting the mountain. I'm wondering, it almost gives me a feeling like the edit is maybe from the same photographer. I can't really tell to be sure, but this image and the next one we see, I feel are really strong images. If I would do anything with this image, I would still slightly crop down from the top. Just above where that lightning bolt goes out of the frame on the right side. But overall, the edit is not bad. There's maybe a little bit of haloing around. You can see it maybe most strongly on the rocks on the left side of the image. But overall, this gets a high thumbs up from me.
I agree. The way it's just lighting up all of the crags in that canyon there. Oh my God. I love the tones. It's very dramatic. This also has those cinematic Mordor feelings.
Yeah, Mordor. I like it. I think it's kind of cool with the light, just a thought of the when you see a bolt like this and on a photo, it can feel really flat unless you've got a really nice landing point where it gives you more of a 3D effect. But the fact that it's lighting up that little valley and it almost looks like it's in front of that peak on the right, it gives you this idea, this perspective that that bolt is actually traveling more towards the camera than it's just going from left to right. You might look at it and go, oh, it's just going left to right. But here it's actually got, at least when I'm looking at it, it gives me a 3D impact because of the way it's kind of traveling through and lighting up that peak. So I think now that this is the same dang mountain, I can just, now I realize it. And it looks like they were, and even the same little foreground, I think right there compared to this. So they just stepped back into a tunnel because Linda said it's dangerous. So get inside. So, but again, this is kind of one of those things where the lightning bolt lands behind it. And we talked about this. I think this was in the lightning category as well. And the lightning itself isn't as impactful because you don't see landing points landing behind everything, but there's still something magical about this composition. I just am like in awe of finding a spot like this to be able to do this is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's the light that's kind of hitting the rocks that are wet inside of this, what I would call a natural framing. And this is a really, I think, interesting compositional choice in that sense. I really love using elements that are readily available in the environment to try to frame the shot and then also get the storm in the shot. Yeah. Because it really, I feel, for me as someone looking at this, it kind of puts you in the location there. It ties you to it by giving you these close elements close to the frame that are part of it. You can see the rocks that essentially the mountain in the back is made of. So it has this kind of repeating element. It's a lovely shot. I don't mind any of the raindrops; they can all stay.
Yeah.
Like it helps tell the story of just how chaotic this moment is, you know.
Yeah.
So well done. I mean, clearly the shadows are lifted, especially on the mountain face, quite a bit in the last shot as well. But I don't think that it was done in such a way that really detracts overall from the image. So it's really great shot.
Yep. Okay, we'll go on to this next one. I think what it could easily, I think it could be just a little bit, yeah, it's a little soft, but I think what's easy to miss is that there's a big old like tornado back there. And so it's like something, if you like see the lighting and the structure and all the stuff, you're like, wow, this is really great, and the blues and everything, and then you realize, oh, there's a monster tornado back there, which looks like it's possibly a different storm. I don't know. It's like kind of weird because I would have, maybe it wrapped around, it's still part of it, but it feels almost detached in a way. But
Right.
stunning storm with that tornado back there. Jennifer, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. My eye actually went right to that tornado. And that might be because I am assuming there's some dodging and burning happening back there to bring out the white in that funnel and that, that updraft on that shadow side on the right. It might be a little overdone for my taste in terms of that dodge and burn. So, that's a little questionable to me. And I think some of the post-processing in terms of our saturation is a little overdone, but the composition is spectacular. And what is seen, I do appreciate the textures and things like that. But I think for me, just post-processing decisions that I would maybe reconsider.
I'm gonna move on to the next one so we can get through this. I think if I'm looking at this and I see the tornado, I think in my brain I would maybe just sneak that tree out of there because it's right next to it. And I think I don't like always like having to change the image, but sometimes something like that I don't think is necessarily adding anything. So getting rid of it takes a little bit of a detractor from the tornado way to maybe make it stand out a little more. We'll go to this one. And I'll let Linda talk about this one if you want. It's probably a little blue, but we'll see what you have to say.
I would say, yeah, the colors are just a little too much, maybe a bit too blue and a bit too green, and the foreground is probably a little too lifted, and the horses might be a little too, I don't know if it's dodgy Bernie or lifted. The image overall by itself is really great. I just, maybe crop it down from the top. That top almost quarter or third of the image isn't for me adding anything. And again, it's really difficult to, roll off highlights in very stark contrast. Maybe, I don't know, almost get the feeling that this person might have used the hue and saturation and luminance to kind of bring the blues down to try to rein in what was happening on the left side.
Yeah.
It's a bit too much for me. I love to see horses in the composition. We've seen a couple of really amazing shots, and I think I was looking through all entries that we've had in this contest, and there was a couple of horse images in there that were really outstanding. This one falls a little bit flat in terms of having the horses in it, just because the horses aren't really doing anything interesting, and they're also kind of below the horizon. They're not like framed against the horizon. But in terms of all the images that we've gotten, this is a very nice image. Just editing wise, it's a bit too much for me.
I agree. All right, we'll go on to this one, Jennifer. I don't know what you think of this one. It's a little bit. I don't know. I just like the colors, and I don't mind the fence, but I'm kind of curious what you think.
Yeah, the colors are nice. We love a good rainbow. My big problem is that the fence is in focus and the scene is not. So again, we kind of talked about this in one of our previous critique videos, that your focus impacts your impact. So what do you want me to be looking at? What is the most important thing in this image? And with the focus being on the fence, that tells me the fence. And well, I would rather the focus be on the sky. So that's my big challenge with this photo. Aside from that, from a thumbnail perspective, it's, I like the colors and the time of day, but I would maybe try to focus on the focus a little more.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't, it's kind of one of those things that, You could do focus on the fence and then do another quick shot and focus on the horizon, and then do like a quick blend for like a stack would be good. I also think if you are going to focus on the fence, then maybe try to back away to the left and get the whole red fence in there instead of just part of it. But the sky is really cool, and it's kind of, for the most part, looks tastefully edited. The greens could be a little green, but they're not. I mean, as we've seen, sometimes the greens are just crazy out there with the light. So I wanted to talk about this one. Is, I feel like, an image that if someone saw it and quickly would maybe go, the lightning bolt's blown out and some of the lights are a little weird, and it's not anything like incredible, except the rainbow is like actually a moonbow, which is something that maybe if you just saw it, I mean, people that are out there, and I'm sure Jennifer, since you corrected me on positive and negative light last week, that you would have seen that right away, and probably Linda too. But I've never seen like we haven't had any photo, I don't think, entered in. This is our 4th year doing this, that has had like such a pronounced, moonbow at night and lightning in the distance. Is pretty remarkable. I'm a little bummed that the bolt in the distance is blown out, because that's just would frustrate me personally. And maybe I would get rid of maybe this blurry like boat, because that doesn't really serve any purpose. I'd probably get rid of that and maybe some of the little lights on the horizon. But the light here from the moon lighting up, this foreground, and then the rainbow moonbow is just, it's kind of amazing.
I've never seen a moonbow before, so I think I agree that there are a lot of really special elements in this scene that it's awesome this photographer was able to capture. Those things alone make it special. I would love to hear Linda's thoughts on this image.
Okay, so I think it's amazing to be able to get a moonbow, and it will almost happen just kind of, you weren't expecting it. And I don't think that anyone can plan for that. So the fact that you were able to catch a lightning bolt almost directly center underneath that moonbow is something that we really should pat this person on the back for. It's really incredible. There are a lot of different things going on here. You've got this kind of observation dome in the lower right foreground, and you have these very bright red lights that are kind of on the end of this moonbow. You couldn't just remove it, because you would kind of hurt the moonbow there. And so I think if I were to critique a couple of things about this, is that, again, the blues are very blue. I would maybe pull that back. I would almost try to do what I'm just going to call it homogenizing the image, trying to make it more cohesive, trying to bring the greens down a little bit, and either by coloring the greens a little bit on the blue side to match the blue in the sky, or reducing the blue in the sky to make it a little bit more close to the greens in the foreground. I might actually bring back down the shadows that this person lifted to bring the light into the foreground, and then maybe affect the reds individually, separate from the rest of the image, on a mask, to kind of the impact and the brightness of those red lights there is, for me, a quite strong detractor. I might try to bring that down and see what that looks like. But the impact on the image is, of course, quite good. The points about the boat and the sharpness of the lightning bolt, and just the being able to not have it blown out, are all strong points. That's where I would go with it, and see what it looks like after that, and then see if I'm still in love with the image. Take this vignette off and see what it looks like. Try to get it even. Once you've got a good base of the image, when things are evened out, then you can start doing the creative edit. So first color correction, then color grading, not both at the same time. That would be my advice.
Yeah, like it. All right. This one, I think when I first saw it, the cloud on the left almost feels like it was photoshopped in, because it's so unreal. It feels so like out of place. I can't tell if the horizon's just a little bit crooked, but this is just so cool. And there's like, wherever it hits here, there's actually an upward streamer coming out of a building or near a building. I think those are little houses. So that is a gigantic upward streamer coming up. Looks like 2 stories or something. And the bolt's just a little blown out, but it's obviously looks like it's traveling down some rain, which is very, very hard to avoid when that happens. But just a magnificent juxtaposition of this, city in this insane storm overtaking it at night. I would love to be standing there watching this.
Big impact. I love the composition. We've got those blues are pretty saturated. I do like the balance of the warmth in the city lights and the coolness in the sky. I think that's nice. It might just be slightly overdone, but yeah, it does seem like something that could go viral because it's photoshopped, but it looks but it's because the scale and the compression is so cool. It's a different feeling than, we see these shots. I don't know what focal length this was shot at, but
I don't either. It doesn't show up.
I love it. So I like a lot of things about this photo.
Yeah, I would say that, when you're shooting over cities at night, it's always gross lighting in the foreground. So this is probably close to realistic what it looks like. Fortunately, as editors, we have some say in how we want to communicate that. So I would either bring down the saturation a little bit, or maybe even just shift the color into a direction that's a little bit more pleasing for us. And then with the introduction and a lot of LED lights, you get this kind of vibe. I could also encourage people to look around the edges of their frame and see if there's anything that's kind of annoying. You have this kind of building that's kind of falling off the frame there. Now, I know cities are very difficult because there's always going to be something, but I might see what it looks like if I just crop a couple of millimeters off the bottom there and just get that building out of there. The thing that I love most about this image is that we have three, what I would call characters. Right? We have a very powerful storm on the left that's overtaking a city. The city is a character, that storm is a character, and that bolt is a character. And the city lends a scale to the whole thing. So I feel it's an amazing image in terms of that. So well done.
All right. I'm going to go to this one that I absolutely hate because I like it so much. And Jennifer and I and Dennis talked about it already. So Linda, I'll let you go first since we haven't heard from you on this one. This was in the Lightning Photo of the Year.
Well, wow, this is a beautiful image. I would love to be there. I'm a little bit jealous.
I'm very jealous.
I'm very jealous. An incredible lightning bolt and an incredible storm with structure. The editing isn't necessarily overdone. I would say it's a little on the soft side, which leads me to believe that either there's some like cross processing going on, where you introduce color into shadows or something like that, that I don't particularly like. Now, we probably should talk about those little trees that are in the foreground. Now, they are centered and cool and everything, but do I like them? Actually, personally, I don't. I feel they detract. I would have liked to see the horizon flatten. It's probably, if I had to guess, I think everybody else would like them there, maybe. I didn't hear Jennifer yet, but even since I know Mike and Dennis a bit more, I think they wouldn't mind that being there. But maybe because that little filament is just touching that guy.
Yeah, that part bugs me. That part definitely bugs me, the filament touching that tree. And that's just me being freaking anal lightning photographer for like 15 years or whatever. But,
yeah. If I would do any kind of, because there is a limit on how much removal or addition of things we should do to our photos to keep true to the moment, right? I don't know exactly where we are with that on this contest. And so I think as a person who enters this contest, this might be a question that they have. What is okay to remove? What do I need to leave in? And maybe we can set up more clear guidelines on that in the future. But if I had to do anything, I would remove the guy on the left and remove the guy on the left and on the right and just leave the one if you wanted to have something there. But I'm being very nitpicky. If I got this shot, I would be over the moon. That's overall my vibe.
Yeah. Jennifer, what did you think of the trees since she kind of asked you?
Yeah, I love the trees. I think they're like, I'm seeing character, right? And maybe it's because I'm a portrait photographer or something. But I see three little characters under there. And the first one's zapped and the next one's next in line. I can make a whole story around those three little guys under there. And I think it's a fun little element. I mean, how many times do we see a supercell with a flat? I feel like these aren't competing for my attention. They add character to the frame for me. And that's just how I'm feeling.
You know what, Linda, what's kind of interesting is that filament thing is the only part about that bugs me, because I'm just like Jen. I like the trees. For some reason, I feel like I've seen this image a few times now, first when it was posted and stuff like that. And the trees I feel like it would be lacking without it. However, I think what you could actually do is instead of getting rid of the trees, you could just get rid of the bottom part of this filament so it just pops up like right here and stops.
That's blasphemy. We're not deleting the lightning. Mike, you're fired.
But see, I would rather much do that than get rid of the tree. And so, because it does touch, because the filament's touching the tree, that does bug me a little bit. But I feel like this is one of the best like lightning structure photos I've seen in a really long time, and I'm very jealous about it. And I wish I was there, and I might have been able to be there. And anyway, I was here for this one, and I will say that there weren't like, this was very, very difficult to shoot. So we've got this image, and then we got 3 more images to go. The last one is also of the storm, and I found when kind of going through all the submissions that it's very difficult for people to shoot this one. It was nonstop flashing. It was bright. It was not bright. It was just a constant strobe. And this one, I can see that there's ghosting.
Yeah,
the clouds. The first thing that one of the first things I see, but it was also one of the few that actually had a bolt that wasn't blown out and decently sharp. Even the ones that I shot of this were like soft and very irritating because it was probably 50, 60 mile per hour winds, like inflow winds at the surface. We're just on this flat cap rock, nothing around. So it was incredibly difficult. And that's the only thing I can lend to it, because I know I'd be like, if I just saw this image and I hadn't been there, I'd be like, well, I wish they would have been a little more focused, and the ghosting is a problem. And there could have been other frames that didn't have the ghosting in it, but maybe they didn't have that cloud to ground lightning bolt, because there wasn't like a ton of them. So they're very difficult situation, but I like that this one had a lightning bolt in it, and at least had some decent sharpness compared to a lot of the other ones, because very, very difficult to shoot.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I was the only person that wasn't shooting the storm. I've seen there were a lot of people on this particular storm, so I've seen quite a few iterations of this shot.
Yeah.
For me, it falls a little bit flat because it's so vastly underexposed on the left. Now, I know how hard the situation was. I saw some real-time footage, and I've seen other people's renditions, but I do know it's possible. So I think a shot like this, in this particular case, really comes down to your technical prowess and picking good ways to shoot this. And this might be one of those situations that if you're just not sure how to shoot it, that bracketing could maybe, so that later you can educate yourself on trying to pick better settings for when a situation like this arises. I've seen some really incredible shots of this particular storm. There's a bit of, I guess the highlights or the whites on the right side of the frame where the lightning bolt is were probably pulled down quite significantly. It introduces this kind of gritty grayish color into it, this kind of sandiness, which sometimes is in the sky, but I just feel like maybe that was pulled down slightly too much. I don't know. There's also a little speck or something on my monitor. I hope it's not my food. No, it's not. That's kind of in the mid on the far right, and then those little dots that are under the storm.
I'd probably get rid of those.
But I really love, the kind of violence of this storm. And that's what I really liked about a lot of the different shots that I saw, is this color just pouring out of the center of that, those layers there.
The inflow with the wind farm, I think it might have had a little bit more successful impact there. Yeah. But very cool. Very cool.
That's a great point. I know personally, me going through trying to find an image that was worth like doing a still frame from, because I was just shooting constantly, that it was very hard to find the right ones, because there was a lot of just really bright on the right, dark on the left, ghosting kind of stuff. Like you had to like, there wasn't like, oh, every other frame is great, I could post any of these. And it's like, no, a few of them are good, but the rest kind of tough. So, all right, this is we're down to our last two. This is just everything about this one. It may be a little bit dark on the right. I think we talked about that in our tornado photo of the year one. So there's a little bit of, maybe some of the shadows here could be a little bit less dark. But I definitely love the mood and the vibe of this, and the mid-level dust and the the tornado perfectly, kind of lit so it looks 3D. This is just again, one of those situations that we could nitpick at some of the stuff, but at the same time, these kind of shots are incredibly rare to get, and so it kind of makes it one of my favorites. Okay. Linda, I know you didn't get to talk about it, so go ahead and rip it to shred.
I have a feeling I might know who this is from, but and this person I feel has made, if it's the right person, they've made quite a few leaps and bounds in the editing department, and I know I sometimes can be harsh in my critiques, and so I don't know if I've ever upset them, but I love this image. First of all, this moment is incredible. I love the foreground. There's nothing that I don't like about this image. If I could give any guidance on the editing, overall, it looks a little bit soft. I don't think that that's a longer exposure time issue. I think that's we're going on the negative clarity these days. So instead of the slider going to the right, now we're going to the left or something.
It could be also the Orton effect that
something like that. But the heavier vignette for me, I would pull it back a little bit. And maybe there's a little bit of this cross processing or something. I'm not quite sure. But overall, this image gets super duper high ranking. Yeah.
Yep. All right, Jennifer talked about it already on the tornado one. So we'll go to this last one. Again, of that storm, this one at least for me had for what was happening that night, very in focus compared to anything else. And the only thing about this one that I feel like it was an interesting storm. One of the best parts of the storm for me was that there was such deep hail core blues in so many shots that I feel like this one being pure white, that was also really cool because when the lightning lit it up and you could see this whiteness in the dark, that was amazing. But I feel like one of the best parts of that storm was kind of that deep blue that kept showing up. Even, and a lot of that wasn't just cameras showing it was the naked eye. You could see these blues and it was incredible.
That's cheating. Because you knew what it looked like, but as people who've never seen this storm, we don't know what it looks like. So that you can't really say that. I would say that.
Take it back. Delete.
No, but you're probably right. I can see actually some of the blues there, especially.
There's a little bit.
Yeah, of the updraft there. There's a bit of haloing and stuff going on, and clearly the shadows were lifted a bit. The moment is incredible, and even though I know it's already cropped out of this. Kind of 3x2 that most cameras come standard in. Since it's so dark on the left side of the frame, I might actually take the top left corner and just pull it to the right and down slightly so that we focus in more on the play between the lightning strike on the very far right and the updraft itself. Color wise, I might make a couple of different choices. I noticed that a little bit of the color is kind of getting shredded as you near more the top right of the image. I would have to kind of see the raw to give more specific guidance, but the moment is incredible and the shot is incredible. I don't know if that's just a water puddle in the foreground or if that's some kind of, I don't know, reservoir or.
It's probably if I were to, I don't want to cheat because I was there, Linda, so I definitely don't want to cheat. But this was a night that I got stuck in the mud shooting this storm, and it had been raining like a mother for like a few days. So that was definitely flooding.
Yeah. But overall, great image. That's my feedback.
Yeah, I agree. I echo the cropping concept for sure. I do love that, at least compared to that other shot, not to compare contrast, but we get more information on the left side of the frame. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it contributes to the shot. I can tell they were trying to center. It looks to me they were trying to center that updraft, which I totally understand. But in terms of impact and available information, I think that crop would have just elevated it just a little bit more.
Yeah, I can see that. I like that idea. I think I would probably crop it maybe just a little bit. If I look back, like looking at the thumbnail in Lightroom, kind of just a quick look, I do feel like compared to that last one, like you said, Jen, there's a lot more information on the left. So it feels more balanced, especially the foreground is kind of lit enough there that it does give some balance. Yeah. And it's kind of weird that that's bright there, but the right side is dark. And so I don't know if that was, just the way it got lit up or if they brought up the shadows there. But I feel like it's a lot more balanced than the other one. And when you look at the thumbnail, it kind of feels like, yeah, it's centered on the main meso part of the storm. It gives it some balance, but probably a little bit of a crop to the right would also work. So, all right, that's our top 30 photos of the year. Congrats if you made it, and stay tuned for the finalists.